Greetings everyone and welcome to the 96th session of the online Optom learning series or OOLS. Let me introduce to you all our speaker for today. So today we have once again Dr. Frank Eperjesi. He has been with us for one of the sessions where he has discussed a few techniques which will help us in our optometric eye examination. He is a past head of an optometry school in the UK. Over 30 years of experience as an optometrist and as an educator. He also has worked as an independent in a corporate practice, and he has his own practice for about 10 years now. His specialization is in pediatric optometry, binocular vision, and low vision. He is also the past interim deputy head of a UK business school and a past professor in the learning innovation. And I think in the year 2020, to be more precise, when we started OOLS just a month ago in March 2020, Dr. Frank is also a co-founder director of the iTools professional development platform. And that platform has developed a community of over 650 eye specialists where he shares his resources in terms of education into optometry. Not only that, Dr. Frank is also author of 2 books which are also available for you if you want to purchase it on Amazon. So welcome once again, Dr. Frank, onto our platform. Thank you so much for giving us the time again. And let me just leave the screen time to you now.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And welcome to everyone who's listening live. And welcome to everyone who might be listening to this later on through some other platform. Great. So helping people with educational underachievement. I read a great deal. I'm always reading, and not to be able to read or have something that puts me off from reading would have a major impact on the quality of my life. Can you imagine being a school child, a pupil at school, and not being able to read to your full potential? Can you imagine being pretty clever, having a reasonable IQ, being able to verbally communicate, but not be able to read from books or from handouts or from notes? If you can't do that, your education will suffer. And if your education suffers, then that really limits the qualifications that you can achieve, the jobs you can go into, and the quality of your life and the quality of your family's life will also be limited. So I believe it's very, very important as optometrists to do the very best we can for children who are underperforming at school, underachieving at school. What I'm not going to be talking about very much today is dyslexia. Some people with dyslexia will have the problems that I'm going to outline in my talk. Some people without dyslexia will have the problems I'm going to outline in my talk. Pure dyslexia is something that optometrists really can't do that much about. Pure dyslexia comes from, it's at the fetal stage before the child is born. There are some misarrangements in the brain that lead to dyslexia. Pure dyslexia needs the help of specialist teachers with specialist techniques to help the people become well educated through alternative ways of learning. I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about things that we as optometrists can do something about. We can detect them and we can treat them. And while I'm on the subject of dyslexia, I try my very best to avoid calling people dyslexics. I do the same when I'm working with people who have diabetes. I never refer to them as diabetics. I never refer to people as myopes. I always remember that I'm trying to help people. So I use the phrase people with dyslexia, people with diabetes, people with myopia. I never let their condition define their title. I never let their condition define who they are. Having said that, if I do refer to people with dyslexia as dyslexics in this talk, then I'm sorry in advance. Okay, so let's move on. So really, in a summary, I'm going to be talking about refractive error, binocular vision anomalies, and something called pattern glare. The poll showed that there are students, hospital clinicians, people in retail outlets, and an academic, and that's great. I really like that spread. The topic I'm talking about today in the UK universities is taught at degree level. All the UK universities teach what I'm going to be showing today. The work I'm going to be talking about today is done in hospitals, it's done in retail outlets, and it's also done in universities. So it's great that we have that spread, because I'm confident that there'll be something for everyone who's listening to learn something today. Here are some symptoms that people with or underachieving at school could or are very likely to have. Now, people with dyslexia can have these symptoms. Many people without dyslexia don't have these symptoms. These are the symptoms that we are very interested in when a child or a college or university aged person attends the practice, complaining of difficulties with learning, complaining of difficulties with their university work, and maybe even older people who are now working, who are still struggling with their reading. The difficulty with these symptoms is, particularly with school-aged children, is they might not have volunteered these symptoms because all they've ever known when they've tried to read are these types of things, and they think it's normal. They think it's normal and that every other kid in the class has these things when they read, but every other kid in the class is cleverer than them and has managed to cope with these things, and that's why their learning and their reading is good. So these symptoms often have to be asked about when you're working with children who are underperforming at school. One of the questions I ask all school-aged children and their parents: how are things going at school? Oh, brilliant. How are things going with the reading? Oh, brilliant. How are things going with the reading? Oh, not so good. The writing's terrible. He's clever. He can talk to me. This is often the parent telling me this. But his reading is really struggling and the teachers don't know what's going on. And that's one of the reasons we brought him here today, or her. We just want to see if there's anything wrong with his eyes or her eyes that you can maybe help with. And when I hear those sorts of comments after I've asked about schoolwork, then I start to ask about these symptoms. And it's very common for children. So I'm thinking now about a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old child. And when I ask them, you know, when you're looking at your book, when you're trying to read, do the letters ever move around at all? Or are they perfectly still? I never try to lead. I always give 2 options with my questioning. Do the letters move around? Do the words move around? Or is everything nice and still? And it's very common for the children then to say, actually, everything is moving around. And then the parents will frequently say, well, you never told me that. Oh, I never knew that. The teachers haven't said anything about it. And that's because the children think it's normal. And it's only when somebody asks them that they volunteer that, yeah, things are moving, that they are blurred, that there is some doubling, that things change size, they get bigger, they get smaller, that there are coloured fringes, excuse me, around the words. So we have to ask these questions, but in a balanced way. So when I ask about, do the letters change size, I always say, do the letters change size or do they stay the same size all the time? It's very important to balance your question with 2 options, because you can lead young people in the direction you want to lead them. You know, I can get a child to say the words are moving and the double and the size, and I can get them to say yes to all of these questions by leading them in that direction. And we need to try our best to avoid that. So these are the symptoms that are crucial. These are perceptual distortions. Of course, the words aren't really moving. The words aren't really changing size. But for some children and some teenagers at college and university and some adults, these perceptual distortions are happening when they look at print. And of course, if any of these things are happening, then it becomes very difficult to read. It becomes difficult to learn how to read. And a lot of learning involves reading. So this is where, as optometrists, we can do a great deal by picking up on these perceptual distortions. And I'll be showing you what we can do with them once we've detected them. And of course, if it's a person with pure dyslexia, they'll probably say no to all of these things. We can still look for refractive error because people with dyslexia sometimes have refractive error that needs correcting. And we can still look for binocular vision problems because some people with dyslexia may have a binocular vision problem as well. Okay. What I'm going to be talking to you about is a 3-step sequential assessment process. And it's incredibly important to follow all 3 steps in the order I'm going to set them out in this presentation today. You do the patient a great deal of disservice by jumping straight to step 2 or jumping straight to step 3, or only doing step 1 or only doing step. So we need to follow each of the steps 1, 2, 3. I'll show you what they are in a moment, and we need to do them in the order that that I will show you, and we need to do all 3 steps. Having said that, there will be some occasions when you don't need to turn to step 3, and I'll try my best to remember to share those occasions with you, what those occasions are. It's a 3-step sequential assessment process. What are those 3 steps, you're asking? Okay, another poll. Fakrudin, can we launch this poll before I go into the 3 steps, just to keep you on tenterhooks a little bit longer? Do you have experience of helping children with educational underachievement? And I'm talking about the visual side of things, really.
So I think people are being truthful. 58%, more than half of them probably do not have any experience in, helping patients with education underachievement. And about 42%, the remaining 40% or so, have some experience with that.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's very helpful for me to see, and that will help me with what I'm going to say in the remainder of the presentation. So it's almost half and half, but not quite. A little bit more don't have the experience, and just a little bit less than half do have the experience, or do have some experience. So what I hope to do is, for those of you that don't have any, I'm hoping to obviously enhance your knowledge in this area, and for those that do have some experience, there'll still be things that you can learn from this presentation today, I'm sure. So let me just remove that from my view, and then we'll move on to the next slide. So the first part of the 3-step sequential assessment process, everyone should be familiar with this who is working as an optometrist. Those symptoms I mentioned can sometimes be purely caused by uncorrected refractive error or undercorrected refractive error. So we need to have a very good look. Step 1, once we've done the history and symptoms and worked everything out and spoken to the parents and got an understanding of what's happening, step 1, like with any eye examination, will be a refractive error assessment. Bearing in mind that even small amounts of refractive error, like an oblique -0.25 cylinder, astigmatism, can cause visual distortion. Even small amounts of hyperopia, and I think I might have got my sign wrong on the hyperopia. What I mean to say here is any hyperopia equal to or greater than plus 0.5. Because what can happen there is, you might be saying, well, these children have loads of accommodation, they can overcome plus 0.50, plus 0.75. Well, yes, they can, but then when they're reading, they have to exert extra accommodation. That drives extra convergence, and that can lead to an esophoria, and that can cause the children may have problems controlling the esophoria. So I'm a great believer in having the sharpest possible retinal image on the retina, And that will then drive everything else, and everything else will be hopefully in a reasonable situation. So remember, children often have loads of accommodative amplitude. Yes, they can accommodate, but that can then cause an esophoria. People with myopia, the children will often say to me, yeah, I've got glasses for the board and I use them for the board, but when I take them off for reading, I don't use them. And that means they are under accommodating, so they're under converging, and that could lead to an exophoria situation. And of course, children can have any combination of those. So when I see people with myopia, I encourage them to wear their glasses for close things, for reading. When I see people with small amounts of astigmatism, especially oblique, I mean, if you want to have a sense of what -0.025 SIL oblique, how that distorts print, next time you're in practice, look at some print and put a -0.025 trial lens, cylindrical trial lens, in front of one or both eyes, and then you can see the effect that even mild refractive error can have on print, especially if you're struggling to read. So don't discount small refractive errors. Think about what can happen to the binocular vision system when people aren't wearing these refractive corrections. And I say to the parents, this is a very low refractive error. This is a very low prescription. There are many optometrists who wouldn't recommend this type of prescription because it's low. In fact, there are many patients for whom I wouldn't recommend this prescription because it's low. But in the case of your child, or if it's a teenager or an adult, in your case, correcting this low prescription, wearing glasses with these sorts of low powered lenses could have an effect, a positive effect. So we shouldn't discount them. We should see. What I don't want is the patient to go, I've recommended these glasses, and then they go and see another optometrist for some reason, and that other optometrist goes, oh, this is a really low prescription. Why is he bothered to give you this? I wouldn't have given this. He's a fake. So I explain to people what they're doing, and they can see from my sincerity that I'm trying my best. I've already found problems that other optometrists didn't find with the symptom questioning. They're not going to go to another optometrist, but just in case they do, I like to explain to them it's a low prescription, and there are people who wouldn't recommend these low prescriptions, but I found them in these cases to be of benefit. So refractive error, then we recommend the glasses, and we also, of course, just after we've checked for refractive error and got that information, we can do a binocular vision assessment. This is step 2. This should be done, I believe, just after the refractive error. Oh, you might be thinking, sorry, just to go back to the refractive error, it's very unusual for me to have to use a cycloplegic refractive assessment in the children that I work with, but I'm licensed to use cyclopentolate, and sometimes I do. And if I do use cyclopentolate to determine the refractive error, I wouldn't be doing a binocular vision assessment, or I might do the binocular vision assessment before the refraction. So it can get a bit complicated, but I understand if you've done a cycloplegic refraction because you're licensed to do that, then you would need to bring the patient back on another day when the drug's worn off for the binocular vision assessment. So, but binocular vision assessment is step 2. So we're looking for subtle signs of binocular vision dysfunction. So what's a subtle sign? Well, is there an esophoria with a slow rate of recovery? Is there an exophoria with a slow rate of recovery? Is the near point of convergence at 20 centimeters when it should be less than 10? Is the amplitude of accommodation in an 8-year-old 6 diopters of amplitude of accommodation when it should be nearer 20, for example? So we're looking at those sorts of things. And we may want to carry out some binocular vision eye exercises, perhaps. We may want to recommend some prisms, perhaps. But binocular vision anomalies can also cause those symptoms that I set out at the beginning of my presentation. So they could be down to refractive error. They could be binocular vision. So we need to try and tidy up and take care of any refractive error, any binocular vision assessment, and then have a look at the effect that it's had on the symptoms that I outlined earlier on. You might be thinking, this is going to take me a long time to do this assessment. And my chair time is expensive. And, you know, I could be seeing someone and recommend a pair of varifocals and that will be better for the business. I understand that. It's important to be able to charge for the work that you do. You need to work out what it costs per hour for your chair time. And you need to set some proper charges. And you need to outline those charges to patients before they come and see you. So you need to outline perhaps a charge for the refractive error side of things. Of course, not forgetting a health check of the front and back of the eye. You probably set out a charge for the binocular vision assessment, for review appointments. I understand that there needs to be money needs to flow because you've got bills to pay. You've got your salary, you've got the salary of your assistants, you've got the rent of the business, you've got the electricity, you've got all these things to pay. So no one is saying to do this for free of charge unless you particularly wanted to. But you need to make sure your practice prospers so you can carry on doing this wonderful work and helping your community. So, you know, and again, in the UK, where we do have some services that are free on the National Health Service, the practitioners that work in this type of area all have charges, unless it's a hospital practice, and then their charges are often a little bit less. Okay, so we've done our refractive error assessment, we've done our binocular vision assessment, and we've taken care of any problems. But when we bring the person back for review, when they've been wearing their glasses for a month, and you've taken care of any binocular vision problem that they had, and then you ask them again about the symptoms, and some patients will say at this stage, you know, I don't have those things anymore. The glasses have really helped. You know, I did those eye exercises, or you gave me that thing called prism in my lenses. You know, that's taken care of everything. I can see the print. It doesn't move now. It's not changing size. It's great. I can see it clearly. And my teachers are helping me to get better at reading. And even in the last couple of months, my reading has improved. Wonderful. Then you don't need to go on to step 3. But in my experience, this is what happens. People will say, yeah, those glasses, Frank, they really helped me. You know, we took care of that eye alignment problem that you explained to me. But, you know, print looks better, but it's still not great. I still get it seems to be changing size. It seems to be flickering. It's not as bad as it was before, but I still get some of those symptoms. And boy, does it still put me off when I try to read. You know, you can get that sort of an explanation from a 7, 8, 9-year-old. Remember, my experience of working with children who have these types of symptoms, they're often very good at verbal communication. Not always, but often. And I guess if you're working with a teenager, they will be able to communicate well to you. And if you're working with an adult, then hopefully they can as well. So when people have got the glasses and you've taken care of any binocular vision issue, if there was one, there isn't always one. There isn't always refractive error issues, but often there are. And they're still complaining of symptoms, then you go on to step 3. In fact, sometimes parents demand of me that I go on to step 3. Even though the symptoms have abated, they say, Frank, we know about colours. We know that colours can help in this type of problem. We know that you've got rid of the symptoms, but we still want to go on and have the colour testing, which we'll see in just a moment, because we've heard that can help people. And I will say, I understand, that's fine. Bearing in mind that I've taken care of the symptoms, let's go on and look at the colour because you've asked me to. Don't forget, there will be some fees for that. You make a note in the records that the patient's asked to go on to step 3, and you go on to step 3. That happens every now and then with me, but usually we need to go on to step 3 because some of the symptoms, some of the perceptual distortions are still there, and we need to take care of them. Yes, so poll 3, do you carry out binocular vision assessment in your current work situation?
So
okay.
yeah, almost half of them, do that. And about 30% of them do it for all their patients, whereas about 20% probably don't have the opportunity to do that as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's very useful. So again, in my personal experience, I will do a basic binocular vision assessment on pretty much every patient that has two eyes. And two eyes with equal acuity and reasonable acuity. I will do a cover test, distance and near, and I will do a quick convergence test and occasionally accommodation as well. I'll do that on everyone. But then when I'm working with children or adults where there's an indication of a binocular vision problem, then I'll be doing a more thorough amplitude of accommodation, a more accurate convergence test, fusional reserves, those sort, maybe a mallet unit test as well. Well, yeah, definitely a mallet unit test. So those sorts of a broader binocular vision assessment when there's a suggestion that there will be possibly a binocular vision anomaly. And those symptoms that I've outlined, yes, those symptoms would drive me to doing a thorough binocular vision workup, conducting many of those tests that I've just outlined. Okay, that's great, wonderful. Thank you for everyone for contributing to that poll. Now then, for those people who still have the perceptual distortions, despite the fact that you've tidied up any refractive error, you've tidied up any binocular vision issue, but they still have some distortion, then they are very likely to have something called pattern glare. Now, pattern glare, I have pattern glare when I look at this type of stripy pattern. When I'm ironing stripy shirts, it gives me a bit of a headache. The stripes make funny patterns. They seem to make diamonds that are coming and going, and it really just drives me a bit crazy. In fact, so crazy that when I buy a shirt now, I make sure it doesn't have any stripes on it. And that my reaction to those stripes is pattern glare, but I only get it when I'm looking at certain stripes, like on my shirts and a few other things, where the frequency of the stripes is 3 cycles per degree. The visual system in a human being is most sensitive to these sorts of contrast gratings when they're at 3 cycles per degree. Thank heavens I don't suffer with pattern glare when I'm looking at text, lines of text, black text on a very white background. I don't get pattern glare then, thank heavens, because that would have led or still lead to problems with reading. There are some people who are sensitive to the pattern that print makes on the printed page. This is pattern glare, and some people are so sensitive to pattern glare that they don't. Someone's just driven past at very great speed on a motorbike, but never mind. Some people are so sensitive to pattern glare that they suffer visual distortions when they look at the contrast sensitivity pattern grating that print makes on the page, particularly dark print on a white background. And if you think about class handouts and notes and books, they often take this form of these black and white stripy lines. So there are some people that experience perceptual distortions, pattern glare, when they look at print. And those are the ones that we can potentially help, very likely help, with color. And people aren't sure of the cause of pattern glare, but it's something to do with some of the neurons in the brain involved in visual processing being overexcited, overreacting to this type of pattern, and that overreaction of certain parts of the visual system in the brain lead to the symptoms that I've outlined at the start of this presentation. This is called cortical hyperexcitability. So neurons in the brain are firing, and they're active and they're overactive when they shouldn't be either active at all, or they shouldn't be active to the level that they are active. And that causes the perceptual distortions. So for me, it's only when I'm looking at certain gratings, but for other people, some people underachieving with their educational work, they get that reaction when they're looking at print on a page, because print on a page is very similar to a spatial frequency grating. Now, I've heard this time and time again. People will come to me and they say, Frank, I can't stand reading from the books I get at school. It's just so bright. So I hunt out old books in the library, the ones with yellow pages, or I photocopy everything onto yellow, because looking at print on a yellow page really helps it make it more comfortable for me. I can see it, it's not overly bright, I can concentrate. So what they're doing is they're reducing the pattern glare effect by making the contrast between the print and the page less. So this old book over here, this old page is sort of yellowed, or maybe it was even printed on slightly yellow paper. And people can often just read a little bit more comfortably or more comfortably from that. The other thing that people come to me with is, and I used to get children referred to me in my low vision clinic when they had pattern glare, because what they were saying to the grown-ups and to the clinicians is, when I read from large print books, I can see everything, it's much better. It's more comfortable for me. It doesn't change size so much. It's not wobbling. It's not this, it's not that. So people said, here's a person that prefers to read large print. This is a low vision patient. Let's send them to Frank in his low vision clinic. And of course, they're not a low vision patient. The reason they prefer to read large print is because making the print larger changes the spatial frequency of the pattern. It's no longer 3 cycles per degree. It'll be a bit less than that. So remember, people with pattern glare are particularly sensitive to 3 cycles per degree spatial frequency gratings. Making the print larger changes the spatial frequency. It makes it easier for people to see because they have less pattern glare. And believe you me, when I was working in my low vision clinic and people were being referred that had pattern glare, it took some explanation to everyone to explain why this wasn't a low vision case, that this was a pattern glare case, and we needed to look at the binocular vision and so forth and so forth. So just be wary of that. It's useful when people come in and say, Frank, I much prefer to read on yellow books or use yellow photocopied paper, because that gives you a heads up straight away that it's very likely to be pattern glare. And if they say, look, my vision's okay, I just really like reading off large print because it just feels more comfortable for me. So look out for those flags and those heads up, as it were. There's a test that you can buy, a pattern glare test. So this is more of a formal way of categorizing pattern glare. This can be purchased from the Institute of Optometry in London. I have no financial interest in this whatsoever. I was working with patients with pattern glare for many years before this test came out. So you can do this work without the pattern glare test. But if you wanted to sort of more formally identify your patients with pattern glare and get some qualitative and quantitative information, then you can get the pattern glare test. It's not very expensive. I'm not going to go through it here now, but it's a way of just sort of further analysing those patients with. I mean, it can help you detect patients with pattern glare, but it can also help you sort of categorise patients with pattern glare. Available online from London if you want. When we identify that a person has pattern glare, and so the distortions are due to pattern glare, we then go through colorimetry stage 2. Sorry to get a bit complex, but this is step 3. Sorry, colorimetry stage 1. Step 3, colorimetry, step 3, stage 1 of colorimetry. Sorry to sort of with the numbers. So the first stage of colorimetry is where we're looking at colour to see what effect colour has on those perceptual distortions. And I'm using here the intuitive colorimetry overlays. Again, they're available from a company called Cerium, C-E-R-I-U-M, again based in the UK. I like to use their equipment and their overlays. There are others available from different companies, but the people that develop these have really assessed them and analysed them and reviewed them and had papers published in high quality research journals, peer reviewed. The research evidence behind these overlays and behind what I'll be showing you in a moment is thoroughly researched and the best it possibly can be. Again, I have no financial interest in anything I'm showing here to do with colorimetry, but This to me is the best equipment from Cerium Visual Technologies, CERIUM, based in London. They will ship things to you if you want them to. So what this text is here is up in the top, my top left hand. This is a block of nonsensical text. This is not designed to be read. This comes with the overlay pack. It's not designed to be read because we don't want children hung up on trying to read this text in the corner up here. We want them to look at the text and tell us how it looks. And children will often say, yeah, it's wobbling, it's distorted. They often say that the gaps between the words are bigger than the words, and so on and so on. And then we go through, again, another sequential process of laying down overlays on half of the print to see what effect the coloured overlay has on the way the print looks. And these are the overlays that we would use with this particular brand, these different colours, and they've been chosen to select the whole of colour space scientifically and rigorously. So they're not all clustered in one area of colour space. You can see they're all around colour space, so they sample colour space in a scientific and rigorous way. We work through each overlay, placing it on one side or the other, and we compare here we have this will be aqua. We compare how the text looks with on the coloured side on the non-coloured side. And again, I'm not using leading questions. I would never say it's better on the rose side, isn't it? No, I say you've told me that the print is wobbling, the print is it's uncomfortable. So there's obviously now one side with a colour and one side without a colour. Do you notice any difference between the sides? And often people will say, yeah, it looks a bit less wobbly or a bit less uncomfortable through the colour. And I'll ask them to is it much better, or is it a bit better, or is it about the same? And they'll sometimes say it's a bit better or it's much better. And then I write down my score for each overlay. And then when I've got the ones that have, there's 3 or 4 that were the top ones, then I'll start comparing overlay to overlay. I'll say to the child, you mentioned that some of the colours made things a bit better. Well, here are 2 colours next to each colour. Is there one of these that's better than the other one? And sometimes they say, no, they're the same. And then I'll often say, well, is there one that's worse than the other one? And they'll say, yeah, that one's worse. So you can approach it from either direction. But we work through and we find the optimum overlay. Very occasionally that can be grey. But in my experience, it isn't often grey. It's more often to be, in my experience, blues, purples, and pinks. So again, we have to be really careful not to lead people to choose a colour. We have to be careful and be mindful of the placebo effect. I remember one classic failure of mine when I worked through this as diligently as I could, as balanced as I could. The child chose an orange overlay, which happens sometimes, but it's very infrequent. And then the father of the child who sat with me said, well, yeah, he would choose orange because his favourite football team play in orange. And then when I asked the child, has the orange of your favourite football team affected the way you've chosen to? Yeah, I chose orange because it's my favourite football. So I thought, okay. So we stopped and we reviewed, and then we tried again in a few weeks' time, trying to factor that element out as best we could. This is tricky work. This is not easy work, which is why, again, that has to be reflected in the fees that you charge. This is hard work, and you're trying to balance your questioning, you're trying to avoid the placebo effect, you're trying to do the very best you can for the patient, and of course for your reputation and the reputation of the business. So we work through, and hopefully we can find one overlay that is the best of all the overlays, and gets rid of all of or most of the visual distortions. Here's a system. Again, I was working in this area before the Wilkins rate of reading test came out. So I've done lots of this type of work without the Wilkins rate of reading test. But again, it can be helpful. And again, this is available from the Institute of Optometry in London. You can Google this and you can find, there may even be local suppliers in your area. So this consists of, again, closely spaced print. There are regular words, but it's nonsensical in the fact that there aren't any sentences to read here. Again, there are just words that can be read, but there's no sense to it. There's no context. There are 4 versions, each with a different arrangement of the same words. And the idea is you take the optimum, let me just get rid of something's blocking my view. You take the optimum overlay, and then you put it down onto version A, where the words are set out in a certain way. And then you time the person reading those words. And you time how many words they got right in a minute. Some people cut it to 30 seconds, and I don't like that. They cut it to 30 seconds and multiply the result by 2, because some children's reading rate, this is what this is measuring, will fatigue over that period of a minute, but not over a period of 30 seconds. So my advice is time the person reading. You don't want them to rush. You just want them to identify each word. There's a score sheet that comes with this test, and then you can, some people will put the overlay down first, and then with version A, measure the reading rate with the overlay. And then they'll do 2 more tests with different versions with no overlays. And then right at the end, they'll do another test with a different version again, using the overlay again. So you get 2 rate of reading results with the overlay and 2 without the overlay. It's called an ABBA presentation. Nothing to do with the world famous band that has the same initials. You get 2 results with the overlay, 2 without the overlay, and then you take an average of with the overlay and without the overlay. Some practitioners will start without the overlay and then do 2 tests with the overlay and then again without. My ABB is usually overlay, 2 tests without the overlay, and a test again with the overlay at the end. And then hopefully with the overlay, you will see a 10% improvement in rate of reading test. This is done usually at the same visit where you've determined the optimum overlay. So again, it can be quite a long assessment. And if you get a 10% or more improvement in the rate of reading with the overlay, you can feel confident that the overlay is the right thing to recommend. Now, some people will get less than 10% perhaps, but I would still recommend that they use the overlay and take it away with them for home use. And of course, you charge for the overlay. One more poll, I think, poll 4. I am coming towards the end of my presentation now. There's just a few more slides left. But do you have access to these? It doesn't have to be the intuitive ones or the Serian ones. You may have a different brand. You know, that's okay. But if you don't have any and you're thinking of getting some, my recommendation would be the overlays available. Again, they're called intuitive colorimetry overlays, and again, you can get them from Serian or you can get them from the Institute of Optometry. So we've got the vast majority of you don't have access.
Yeah.
If you wanted to explore this area of optometry, then you know, you can easily get access to these. Just be careful that there are some overlays, there are some brands that really don't sample color space appropriately. They don't have good science behind them. I mean, there are probably around about, I don't know, maybe 100 peer-reviewed research papers that are looking at colorimetry and binocular vision effects and so forth on educational underachievement. Thank you, Fakhruddin, that's wonderful. So some do, most don't. That's very helpful. So just coming on now to the last sort of subtopic I'm going to be talking about. Now, stage 2 of the colorimetry, because of course, overlays are great for reading, but you can't, from a book or from a handout or from a text or newspaper or something, but they're no good for looking across at the board. And if you're copying from the board or you're looking at the board and then trying to read something close up at the same time, overlays are no good. Now, some people say to me, Frank, an overlay is all I need. I don't have any distance requirement for my learning or for my job. I just need to make the print in my books look look reasonable. So they tend to be people who are working age. I don't want any tinted lenses. I don't like the way they look, and I don't want this and I don't want that. I'm happy with an overlay. Fine. They take the overlay away. You review them in a month, perhaps. They come back and they usually say, Frank, with the overlay, my reading is so much better. It's so much more comfortable. I don't get so many headaches. This is brilliant. I'll just have the overlay and I'll use that when I'm at work for my reading tasks. I don't need to go on and look at any tinted lenses. Most people will go on to stage 2 of colorimetry, which is the tinted lens assessment. And again, this needs a particular type of equipment. So again, there's an investment here, and this is called the intuitive colorimeter. And again, it's available from Cerium Visual Technologies. I think there are other versions of these types of equipment, but again, this is the one with all the research evidence underpinning it. So patient comes back and they say, yeah, the overlay was great. It's helped a lot, but I need to look at the board. I need to follow things, this and that. And then you can use this colorimeter to work out which is the best tinted lens color to have. And some of you might be thinking, well, surely I'll just take the color off the overlay. If it's an aqua overlay, I'll just give them an aqua tint. Again, there's good research to indicate. I'll have a look at the questions at the end, if you don't mind. I'm just conscious that I'm going on a little bit, but we will look at the questions at the end. There's good research to show that if you just copy the color off the overlay, bearing in mind I think there's about 10 overlays, you probably won't be giving them the optimum color. You get the optimum precise color that the person needs through the colorimeter. And these tints are called precision tints. You can have 20 people with pattern glare visual distortions, and each one of them would have a slightly different tint, or even a broadly different tint. Out of those, just because they've got pattern glare doesn't mean they're all going to have the same tint or benefit from the same tint. And it's the intuitive colorimeter that enables you to focus in. There are hundreds of thousands of colors, maybe even millions of colors that can be found using the colorimeter. So again, inside the box will be some nonsensical print, and the clinician can change. These are slightly different versions I see. There are 3 or 4 different generations now of the colorimeter. The clinician can change the color inside the box while the patient's looking at the nonsensical print. They would be wearing any refractive correction they have. And then through a process of, again, trial and error, what does this do? What does that do? How are the wibbles? How are the wobbles? How's the contrast? You fine tune and you find the best color in terms of hue and saturation. And then once you've got that color, these trial lenses here enable you to match a combination of trial lenses to perfectly replicate the color that the patient has identified as their best color in the box. You need a clinician. You need someone that can communicate with you, because you're constantly asking them questions. So if you have a person that can't communicate for whatever reason, or can't communicate with you accurately, this will not work. I mean, neither will the overlays, but this in particular. People have to be able to give you information about the effect that the color is having on the nonsensical text that's inside the machine. And then you ask the person to sit back. This is done in a dark room, actually, not that image up there is a bit false. This image here, it's done in a dark room. So really the only light that's available is perhaps a little bit of light on the panel, so you can see what you're doing, and the light from the intuitive colorimeter. Person sits in close, you work out the best color for them, and then you use the trial lenses to match the color that's in the box. You need to bring the color out of the box with trial lenses, and then you can then order the tint from the company. Just a little bit more about that. Each lens has got a code. You may need 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 lenses in your stack of lenses to match the color in the box. You write down the code of each lens that you've used, and then you send that code to the lab. There's actually one final check that I always do. I get together, each lens is replicated twice, so you can get an identical stack of lenses that matches the optimum color, hold them up in front of the patient's eyes while they're looking at text on the table, with the room lights up and fluorescent tubes and tungsten and what have you to mimic an office or a class situation. You hold up the combination of lenses and you ask them, well, how do things look with the lenses compared to without the lenses? Oh, they look much better with the lenses. It's less bright. I don't have a headache. My eyes don't hurt. The symptoms are much, much less. My favorite question is there anything I can do to this color that will make the print look even better, do you think? And it's quite amazing that people say, yeah, if it was a bit pinker, I think it would help a bit more. Or if it was a bit less pink or a bit yellower or if there was a bit more color, I think that would help. So then I can just bring in and try and modify it a little bit. And I'm asking the patient what my modification. Some people will say, no, I don't think there's anything that you can do to this color to change the color. This color is perfect for me. It makes the print. Now, of course, with a 7 or 8 year old, this communication issue can be quite complex. But you have to just try your best. So you send the code. Now, for this part, this is all, as I say, Cerium. Cerium Visual Technologies will, once you've sent the code, they can put any refractive error into the lens that you need and refractive correction. Their quality control is superbly rigorous. They will match the color of the tint on the glasses that they've made for you, on the lenses that they've made for you. They will match it perfectly with the color that you need. They have very sophisticated color measurement systems, spectrometers, all sorts of things in their lab. And if what they've made is slightly out, they throw those lenses in the bin and they start again. Because what they want, even small color differences between what you want and what they've sent, could have a negative effect on the appearance of the print for the person. So for this part, you really have to use Cerium if you're going to go down this route. There are other companies, but I don't think their tints have been so well researched, and they're not as well, in my experience, the quality control at the manufacturing stage isn't as good as this particular company. Once again, I reiterate, I have no financial interest in this company at all. I wish I did, but I don't. Okay, and then I think the last 2 slides. So here we have some examples of people, youngsters. They're not all young. Sometimes they're teenagers. Sometimes they're adults using tinted lenses. The different colors here, and they're using them for schoolwork, homework, office work, university work, maybe even some leisure reading like this one in the middle. She looks like she's reading a Roald Dahl book, whatever. Our aim is to make the print look normal, look good. Now, they may have fallen behind in their reading, so they probably still need some reading support, but it's amazing how quickly children in particular improve with their reading. And I often get reports from children saying, Frank, I don't quite understand from teachers, I don't quite understand what you've done, but whatever you've done, it's amazing, because the certain child, Freddie's reading has improved. He was 11, he was reading at the age of 8, and now 6 months after your glasses, he's reading at the age of 10. So we're nearly there. Thank you. And I get these, or used to get these letters from parents and from teachers. I review in 6 months after the supply of the tinted lenses. Bearing in mind, sorry, one more thing, if there are green lenses, then they can sometimes be mistaken for sunglasses. So it is possible to put a UV filter in. And the trial lenses that I showed in that box, there is a UV, there's a lens with just a UV filter built into it. Just be wary. Sometimes when I hold up, if someone has a green lens and I hold up the UV trial lens in front of them, sometimes it makes the visual distortions a little bit worse. So what I try and do is I try and avoid using a UV filter built into these lenses, and I give very strict advice that these lenses are not to be used as sunglasses. You can get sunglasses off the market for not very much money. They're not sunglasses. These are reading tints and learning tints. Review in 6 months. And then again, what typically happens is people come back and they say, yeah, great, everything is still perfect. My reading is improved. It's great. No symptoms, no distortions. It's all as I want it to be. And others will come back and say, Frank, For the first few weeks, it was great. And slowly over the last couple of months, things have started to drift off. It's still much better with the tint, but it's not quite as good as it used to be. And that's some change in the visual system, or maybe things are settling down. And so then I put them back on the colorimeter, again, charging for this. And there's usually a little fine tweak where if they had an orange lens to begin with, they need a slightly different orange lens 6 months later. Or if they had a pink lens to begin with, now they need a slightly different, a bit more pink, a bit less pink. Maybe one of the other colors needs to be upped. So then after 6 months, I can hone in and get them back to their optimum tint, which is usually very similar to the first tint they have. Some will carry, and then I'll have another review in 6 months or sooner if there is anything starting to go off again with the symptoms. So that's me. So here are some warnings. And this is my last slide. Some people, I don't know why, go straight to stage 3, the colorimetry stage. They don't bother with refractive error, and they don't bother with binocular vision issues. And there are some tinted lens companies that their processes involve going straight to stage 3. And that's not good, because we can't fix perceptual distortions due to binocular vision through color. We can't fix perceptual distortions due to refractive error through color. We need to go through all 2 steps, refractive error and BV, before we go and consider colorimetry. Some people who don't want to invest in the colorimeter because it's quite expensive, they just use overlays, and then they provide tinted lenses based on the color of the overlay. It's an aqua overlay. I'll just give them some aqua tinted lenses. Again, good research has shown that that's not a good thing to do for the patient. It doesn't get rid of the visual symptoms, and in some cases it can make things worse. We use the colorimeter to determine the hue or the color and the saturation, and then I can't see my next line because some things. How do I get rid of that? Can I move that? Oh yes, I can move it. There we go. So I've just moved something out of the way. With some adults who are very good at communicating, the overlay assessment can sometimes be missed out because the overlay step gets people used to making choices about color and talking to you about color. So with youngsters and even teenagers, I don't think I would miss out the overlay step. But with, a 45-year-old businessman that's always had problems with reading, and we've identified that he's got, or her, pattern glare, I can probably miss out the overlay step and go straight to the tinted lens step. And I've done that in the past with very communicative grown-ups, very sensible and can communicate with me well. But again, with youngsters, I'm performing the overlay step. Thank you, everyone. Being very patient. I've gone over, but I've gone over because I wanted to be really, really thorough with this, because this is such an important thing. We can do such an amazing amount of good for children and teenagers and older people by using this type of sequential process and investing in this. And you can develop a practice speciality. You can be known in your area for doing this type of work. You can get famous for helping children get good at their schoolwork. The teachers will help you, will sing your praises because you've made their job a bit easier. The families, the parents, the children, the siblings, everyone will be happy if you can help children with their education, because it's just so important for success in life.
If you have helped some kids to achieve proper or do good in their academics, and of course we are doing that refractive management with which I think 90% of the time helps, but I think this is where it comes into a specialty category where it will help those 10% who we leave behind.
Yes, absolutely. Even 10%, even 1% is too much, I think.
Okay, great. All right. So we do have some questions on the chat. So I'm just getting them onto the screen. And this is the first question. Can we reduce photophobia with these overlays? I mean, you did talk about pattern glare reduction and all that, but does it relate to photophobia as well?
Well, Photophobia, in my understanding, is usually to do with things like people who have albinism, or obviously be photophobic, or some will be photophobic. People that have conditions like iritis, retinitis pigmentosa. That to me is what photophobia will be, an element of those conditions. What people with pattern glare often mention is the page is too bright, it's too glary. So and that's why occasionally it's a grey overlay. That's all the people want, just to tone the contrast down and tone the brightness down. So there is perhaps a photosensitivity element to pattern glare. I wouldn't say it was photophobia. And I think if people are struggling with issues with albinism, retinitis pigmentosa, and active uveitis, then I don't think an overlay would be helpful to them. I think they probably need some dark tinted, neutral density lenses. But certainly pattern glare, an element of that is the page is too bright, and the overlay and the tinted lenses certainly take that brightness away. Nice question. Thank you.
And do you think it helps in color vision deficiency patients when it comes to the overlays?
No. 2 points here. Nice question again. People with color vision deficiency can still do this test, because we're not interested in their perception of the color of overlays or lenses. All we're interested in is the effect that the overlay has on the print, on the nonsensical print, either for the overlay or for the tinted lenses. So if someone has a color vision deficiency, the test is still valid and viable. But these lenses are not designed to help with color vision deficiency. There are other lens systems, other colored tinted lens systems that may help with that. I have to say that the research evidence in that area, tinted lenses helping with color, is a moderate at best. I do know practitioners that issue tinted lenses for color vision deficiency, but they're not using the systems that I have spoken about today.
Yeah, and I think just emphasizing on your point again, the type of questioning you do, right? So you are actually looking for patients who you want them to report that they are easier to read rather than their color is getting better. So when you are asking the questions, the way you ask questions is, I think you have emphasized it a lot during the whole presentation, the way you ask questions, and you don't want them to walk through to your answer what you think in your mind.
That's such a nice way of putting it. Thank you very much. I try very hard not to mention any of the names of the colors. I wouldn't say I'm going to put a rose overlay down. I just say, oh, and here's the next one. Oh, and here's another one. And here's another one. So I very rarely mention any names of any colors.
That's right. Yeah, I relate to this because I was fortunate enough to use the WRRT for my bachelor's optometry research, where I used the Wilkin rate of reading test, and I was checking for amblyopic patients. So I did the overlay experiment with it was just a small experiment, not a bit of research, but I did in amblyopes and check whether the amblyopic eye or the I did it uniocularly. Ideally, it's to be done binocularly, but in amblyopes, I tried to do it uniocularly and see whether there is any preference of difference in the terms of the shades in the amblyopic versus the non-amblyopic eye. So just putting that across.
Okay.
Yeah. The next question is, in your experience, how often do these tints or the lenses have to be changed? Is it in a few months, or probably how frequently would you get your patients to come and look at or examine them so that you can change the lenses for them?
So I will have the day they come and pick up their tinted lenses. That's when a 6-month countdown starts, and then I will invite them back for another appointment in 6 months' time. It doesn't have to be exactly to the day. But round about 6 months, and they in my experience, the return rate is about 97%, because again, parents and everyone wants to do the very best they can. So they come back, and again, in my experience, about 25%, roughly, will need a change at 6 months. So the vast majority will say everything is happy. I'm happy with everything. The symptoms are still, they still go. Oh, they're there when I forget my glasses, my tinted lenses. So about a quarter will need a fine tune at 6 months. And then after another 6 months, again, probably about a quarter may need it, further fine tuning. My experience is, as the years go by, and let's say that I've been working with a 10-year-old child, and we've worked through, and now they're at 13. You will find that as the years go by, it's very unusual after 2 or 3 years to be at the same color that you were when you first started. So there seems to be, as the brain is developing, as the child is growing, as they're maturing, then something is going on in the brain which shifts the optimum color. So some people will change after 6 months, others will change after 12 months or 18 months, but it will be quite unusual for someone not to have changed a little bit after about 2.5 to 3 years. And again, I warn patients of this, parents, because of course, there's a bill to pay. So I say, it's common for things to change as time goes by. Some people change after 6 months, some people change after 3 years. But we will do regular review, because my job is to make sure that your child or you, or if you're a grown-up, has the optimum color, the best possible color, because it's with that color that your reading will be at its best. So it seems to vary, but there does seem to be a change with the passage of time.
Okay, so I think 6 months is what you would advise them to come for a follow-up in the initial stages.
Yeah, and if they say, sometimes, very occasionally, they'll come back and they'll say, in 3 months, Frank, can we come and see you, because things have started to go off, and again, the symptoms are coming back. So very, very unusual for things to start to change for the negative before 6 months, but it happens every now and then. The other part of the question, any important papers to share for colorimetry? Well, there are loads, and I suggest, if you do a search for papers by Wilkins, Wilkins, or Evans. Evans is an optometrist, Evans, is an optometrist. He's done loads of work on this. And Wilkins is a psychologist, and he's done loads of work on this as well. So you will get, and loads of the papers are available freely online. So search for Evans, search for Wilkins. Probably best to search for Evans and Wilkins.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, a couple of more questions. Any importance of colorimetry examination for a particular occupation? Would you want to do colorimetry for any occupational related requirements?
Well, that's a good question. My mind now is focused on occupation, and I'm thinking, okay, if a person needs to make decisions based on color, so if they need to switch off the red button to make sure that the power station is safe, or the nuclear weapons are safe, then if there's any decision making based on color difference, best not to use these tints when there's, or if you're an electrician. But these tints are really designed for print, black printed lines on a white background. These lenses are not designed for occupational, anything other than reading print from a white background. So, for an electrician, I would say, well, if you're reading invoices or you're reading some new health and safety regulations to do with electricity, wear the tinted lenses. If you're changing someone's electricity supply in the house or in a company, you don't need to wear the tinted lenses. Wear them for print. Don't wear them for, things that involve decisions based on differences in color.
That's right. Yeah. So again, here importance is letting your patients know on the use and proper usage of these lenses. They should be not wearing it all the time if that's not required. It's mostly for reading and for your near activities, and specifically when you're reading books, it's on white background, and all those things would get better because we have tested on that. Again, that retaliates on our role as consultant as well.
Yes, thank you.
And I think one thing which comes into my mind again, probably because not every one of us might have the access to this. I would put it as high-end products in terms of testing, right? Do you recommend, for example, if we go to a DIY store, or when we look at the art book stationery store, they have these different colored overlays kind of a thing. If you may have observed, there is like pink color paper, or asbestos sheet, or yellow color paper, or in the initial stage, do you think we probably can try out with that for our patients because they are readily available? I know there is no scientific evidence for that, but do you think that would be of use, or we should ideally depend on accuracy rather than just trying it out?
Excellent question. Thank you. I would not recommend that because again, there's no science behind those colours. They're just colours that someone in a paper manufacturing factory has decided on, and the possibility is that those colours that are chosen from a do-it-yourself from a shop, the patient may have, or the person may have pattern glare, and then you provide them with those colours, and none of them work. So someone says, well, you don't have pattern glare, or it's nothing to do with colours. I read about colours on the internet, but I've tested you with these overlays I brought from the stationery shop, and none of them work. So we don't need to further explore this. So that would be my worry, that sort of homemade, makeshift colour overlay assessment puts people off from getting a proper assessment. What happens in my area in the UK and around here is that not every practice will have this equipment because it's expensive, but some will. So there's some inter-practice referral. So some practitioners that have the equipment will receive referrals from other practitioners on the basis that they don't steal the patient. This happens in contact lenses as well here. So there may be one practice in the region that has the equipment, so the other practitioners will refer to that practice to have this work done on the basis that the patient is always referred back. And because it involves often traveling some distance, patients tend to come back to the referring practitioner anyway. So I'm not saying that every practice here has this equipment. As I said, some of the state hospitals have it here. So again, practitioners will refer to the state hospital, but I wouldn't recommend that homemade approach for fear of making a poor decision.
That's right. I think misdiagnosis is our worry. As you mentioned, you might just say the patient you don't have, and then he would probably be suffering until he finds someone who can have that equipment and do, and why let our patient suffer, where you can send it to your fellow colleagues who has that. And I think co-management is a way to go. We can co-manage it together.
Yeah, co-management is a sign of a mature profession.
That's I think with that that's a closing sentence. I would say it's very, very important, which we understand that co-management is sign that your profession and you probably have matured enough so that you can refer patients, and it's not that the patient will go to them and you will lose your patient. It will definitely be coming back to you as well. And I think that patient practitioner relationship and trust is where you come into place and your consultation skills come into place.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. One last question, Dr. Frank. Which age patients we can perform this test? Is there any age criteria? Is it for older than 6 years or something like that?
It's not really the age. It's whether the person can communicate with you. So I've worked with 7-year-olds. I don't think I've worked with anyone younger than that, because they simply don't, in my experience, younger than 7, they don't have the communication skills. They don't have the language understanding. They need to be able to understand the concept of different. Here's an overlay. Does it make things different? They need to understand the concept of the same. They need to be able to talk to you about what they can see. So in my personal experience, I've worked with some 7-year-olds who are very able to communicate. So it's to do with the communication. And I've worked with some teenagers who weren't able to communicate, so I couldn't really do the work I needed to do. So it's to do with their ability to communicate and have an understanding of the concepts of different and the concept of the same. That's the limiting thing, not so much the chronological age. I know there's a relationship between the two, but
yeah, that's right. I think as long as they understand your questions and they can perform the test with you, it should be good enough. Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so with that, thank you, Dr. Frank, for enlightening us with this wonderful and a unique topic, which is something where we can look forward in terms of developing our practice as the profession progresses. So thank you so much for giving us this time.
You're very welcome. I've very enjoyed it. I'm so glad that so many people have joined us. I hope to make a difference, and I'm sure that everyone listening will be making a big difference to the education of young people. And I thank you for setting this up, and I wish everybody all the best.
Thank you. Most welcome, Dr. Frank. And just some information for the attendees. We are in a progress in finishing 100 live sessions this month, and we are looking out to put a video across where we want some feedbacks from the attendees, so that it helps us to make a video with all your feedback. So we have shared some ideas on how you can do that. We just want you to record yourself a 30 to 40 second short video letting us know about who you are, where you're from, and how online Optom Learning Series has helped you. Share us any thoughts, any feedbacks which you have, and send it to us before 25th of January so that we can put it across for the whole community to have a look at. Thank you everyone for joining. We do have sessions planned for next weekend. Both sessions are on contact lenses. Stay safe, take care. Until then, I'll see you all again next weekend. Thank you, Dr. Frank, once again. Have a good evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.